Chosen one. The question was simple. But the answer was powerful enough to stop an entire family from breathing. Nobody knew that one name still lived inside their heart. Nobody knew that behind every smile, every forced conversation, and every attempt to move on, there was a secret that had never truly died. And tonight, that secret is about to be exposed in front of everyone. Listen carefully, because this message did not reach you by accident. There was a gathering unlike any other. Family members sat around a large table, voices filled the room, and laughter echoed through the walls. To anyone watching from the outside, it looked like a normal evening. People talked about weddings, future plans, children, careers, and all the things families usually discuss when they believe life is moving forward exactly as it should. Your person was sitting quietly among them. Most people never noticed it, but silence had become their closest companion. They smiled when expected. They answered questions when necessary. They nodded along to conversations they barely heard. Yet beneath that calm appearance was a storm they had been carrying for far longer than anyone realized. The family thought they understood them. The family believed they knew exactly who your person would eventually marry. The family had already created their own version of the future. But destiny was preparing something very different. Don't skip. One relative suddenly laughed and said something that seemed harmless at first. If you had to get married tomorrow, who would you choose? The question floated through the room. People smiled. A few laughed. Someone joked that it was an easy question. Another family member immediately started guessing names. Nobody expected the atmosphere to change. Nobody expected one simple question to uncover years of hidden emotions. At first, your person smiled politely. They tried to avoid answering. They looked away. They reached for a glass of water. But the family wouldn't let it go. The teasing continued. The pressure increased. Come on. Just answer. We all know who you're going to say. Everyone thought they already knew the answer. Everyone thought they could predict the future. Everyone except destiny. Your person lowered their eyes. For a moment, it looked like they were somewhere else entirely. Not in that room. Not at that table. Not surrounded by family. Their mind had traveled backward through years of memories they had tried desperately to forget. Memories of conversations that lasted until sunrise. Memories of promises. Memories of laughter. Memories of pain. And most of all, memories of you. The room continued waiting. Someone repeated the question. If you had to marry someone tomorrow, who would it be? Your person finally looked up. Their expression changed. The smile disappeared. The air felt heavier. Even the loudest relatives suddenly became quiet. Something was different. Something was happening. And then they spoke. One name. Just one name. Your name. The room froze. Not a single person moved. Not a single person expected that answer. The silence became so intense that people could hear their own breathing. Some relatives exchanged confused looks. Others stared directly at your person as if they had misheard them. One family member nervously laughed, thinking it had to be a joke. But your person wasn't laughing. They weren't smiling. They weren't trying to entertain anyone. For the first time in a very long time, they were speaking from the deepest part of their heart. And everyone could see it. Don't skip. The family had spent months, maybe even years, believing that chapter was over. They assumed your person had moved on. They assumed time had erased everything. They assumed another name had replaced yours. But they were wrong. Completely wrong. Because while everyone else was busy moving forward, your person had been fighting a private battle. Every day they tried to convince themselves that forgetting you was the right choice. Every day they told themselves that life would become easier if they simply let go. Every day they tried. And every day they failed. Because some connections refuse to disappear. Some souls leave marks that time cannot erase. Some names continue echoing through the heart long after everyone else believes the story has ended. Your name was one of those names. The family couldn't understand it. How could they? They only saw the surface. They never saw the sleepless nights. They never saw the moments your person stared at old messages. They never saw the tears hidden behind closed doors. They never saw how many times your person almost reached out but stopped themselves at the last second. The family saw the mask. You were the one who touched the soul beneath it. And now that truth had escaped. Now everyone knew. Now there was no hiding it anymore. One relative finally broke the silence. What do you mean? The question sounded innocent. But the answer that followed changed everything. Your person took a deep breath. Their hands trembled slightly. And then they said something nobody expected. I never stopped loving them. The room froze again. Even harder this time. Because suddenly the family realized this wasn't nostalgia. This wasn't a joke, this wasn't a random answer. This was a confession. A confession that had been trapped inside their heart for far too long. And once the truth begins escaping, it becomes impossible to stop. Don't skip. The moment those words left your person's mouth, the entire room seemed to lose its balance. Conversations disappeared. The laughter that had filled the house only minutes earlier felt like a distant memory. Every pair of eyes remained fixed on them, waiting for an explanation that nobody was prepared to hear. Some family members looked shocked. Others looked uncomfortable. A few appeared frustrated because the answer had shattered the future they had already imagined for your person. But your person no longer seemed concerned with anyone else's expectations. For years they had carried the weight of silence, and now that silence was breaking apart piece by piece. One relative cleared their throat and tried to force a smile. You're talking about the past. Your person slowly shook their head. No. The answer came immediately. No, I'm talking about someone who never became my past. Those words landed like thunder inside the room, because everyone suddenly realized something they had never considered before. While they had viewed you as a chapter that ended long ago, your person had never seen it that way. To them, the story had never truly ended. It had simply been interrupted. The family exchanged uneasy glances. Nobody knew what to say, nobody knew how to respond when faced with a truth that powerful. For years they had encouraged your person to move on. They had introduced them to new people. They had suggested new relationships. They had reminded them that life continues whether love survives or not. They genuinely believed they were helping. But now they were beginning to understand something. Moving on and healing are not always the same thing. Your person had continued living. But they had never stopped carrying you inside their heart. Don't skip. A family member finally asked the question everyone was thinking. If you still feel that way, why didn't you tell anyone? Your person looked down for a moment. The answer wasn't simple. Because some pain becomes so familiar that people stop talking about it. Some heartbreak becomes so deeply rooted that words can no longer describe it. And some love becomes so sacred that speaking about it feels impossible. They took a slow breath. Because nobody wanted to hear it. The room became quiet again. Every time I mentioned them, people told me to forget. Their voice remained calm. Every time I tried to explain what I felt, someone told me it was over. Another pause. So eventually I stopped talking. No one interrupted. No one argued. Because deep down they knew it was true. Many people tell others to move on without realizing how deeply a connection affected them. Many people assume that if enough time passes, feelings automatically disappear. But the heart doesn't operate according to calendars. The heart doesn't obey deadlines. And your person's heart had refused to forget you. One older family member leaned forward. Do you honestly believe they still think about you? The question hung in the air. For the first time that night, uncertainty appeared in your person's eyes. Not because they doubted what they felt, but because they had spent so much time wondering about you. Wondering whether you ever thought about them. Wondering whether you ever remembered the promises. Wondering whether you ever looked back. Wondering whether they still occupied even a small corner of your heart. The truth was that they didn't know. And not knowing had become one of the hardest parts of all. Don't skip. Your person stared at the table. 1,000 memories flooded their mind. The first conversation. The first moment they realized you were different. The way you understood things they never had to explain. The way your presence could calm storms inside them that nobody else even knew existed. They remembered the plans. The dreams. The future they once imagined. And then they remembered the separation. The confusion. The silence. The questions that never received answers. Years may have passed, but certain memories remained untouched. As vivid as the day they happened, as alive as ever. One relative shook their head. I don't understand. Your person smiled sadly. I know. Because how could they understand? How could anyone understand a connection they never experienced? How could anyone understand the feeling of meeting someone who felt like home? Some people spend their entire lives searching for a connection like that. Others find it once and never find it again. Your person believed you were that once-in-a-lifetime connection. And that belief had never changed. Not even after everything that happened. Don't skip. The room remained silent. Then someone asked the question nobody expected. If they walked through that door right now, what would you do? The question hit your person harder than anyone realized. Because they had imagined that moment countless times. In quiet nights. During lonely drives. During moments when memories returned without warning. They had imagined seeing you again. Hearing your voice again. Looking into your eyes again. Sometimes the imagined reunion was joyful. Sometimes it was painful. Sometimes it ended with tears. Sometimes it ended with forgiveness. But one thing remained consistent in every version. They always chose you. No matter how many times life forced them apart. No matter how many obstacles appeared. No matter how much time passed. Their answer never changed. Your person looked up. The room waited. And then they said quietly, I would tell them the truth. A chill moved through the room. Because honesty is powerful. And the truth your person had been hiding was bigger than anyone expected. What truth? Someone asked. Your person swallowed hard. Then finally spoke. The truth that I compared everyone to them. Several relatives stared in disbelief. The truth that nobody ever felt the same. Another pause. The truth that every time I thought I was moving on, I realized I was only pretending. The room fell completely silent again. Because now there was no denying it. This wasn't a crush. This wasn't temporary. This wasn't unfinished curiosity. This was love that had survived everything. Distance. Time. Silence. Pride. Fear. Misunderstanding. And despite all of it, it was still alive. Don't skip. The emotional weight inside the room became almost unbearable. Some family members were beginning to feel sympathy. Others felt regret. Because they suddenly remembered all the times they had dismissed your importance. All the times they had assumed your person would simply forget. All the times they had pushed them towards someone else. Now they understood. Your name wasn't just a name. Your name represented an entire chapter of their soul. A chapter that had never been replaced. Your person looked around the room. For the first time all evening, they seemed lighter. Not happy. Not healed. But lighter. Because carrying a secret for years becomes exhausting. And speaking the truth, even when it hurts, can feel like breathing again. One family member quietly asked, "Do you think you'll ever stop loving them?" The question lingered. Your person thought carefully. Then they smiled. A real smile this time. Small. Sad. But genuine. And they answered with words that left the entire family frozen once again. I stopped trying to stop. The room went silent. Because everyone understood exactly what that meant. It meant they had spent years fighting their own heart. Years trying to erase feelings that refused to disappear. Years trying to become someone else. And eventually they realized something. Love cannot always be controlled. Some connections remain. Not because people choose them, but because they become part of who they are. And somewhere deep inside, your person had finally accepted that truth. They no longer wanted to run from it. They no longer wanted to deny it. They no longer wanted to pretend. For the first time in years, they were standing face to face with their own heart. And what they saw there was still you. Don't skip. But what happened next would leave the family even more shocked than the confession itself. Because a few moments later, someone in that room revealed a secret they had been hiding about you all along, a secret that would completely change everything your person believed about the past and force them to question whether destiny had truly finished writing your story together. Don't skip. The moment those words settled into the room, an older relative who had remained unusually quiet throughout the entire conversation slowly raised their head. Their expression had changed. It was no longer the look of someone listening to a family discussion. It was the look of someone carrying a secret. Your person noticed immediately. The room noticed too. And before anyone could ask what was wrong, the relative spoke. There is something I never told you. Every eye turned toward them. Your person's heartbeat quickened. The atmosphere shifted again. The relative took a deep breath and continued. A long time ago, after everything happened between you and them, I received a message. Your person's face went pale. A message. From who? The answer arrived seconds later. From them. The room froze. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Your person stared in disbelief. Because they had never heard about any message. Not once. Not ever. The relative lowered their eyes. They asked about you. The words hit your person harder than anything they had heard all night. They wanted to know if you were okay. Tears immediately filled your person's eyes. For years they believed you had forgotten. For years they believed you never looked back. For years they believed the silence meant the feelings were gone. But now they were hearing something completely different. The relative continued. They didn't sound angry. Another pause. They didn't sound distant. Their voice softened. They sounded heartbroken. The room became completely silent. Your person could barely breathe. Every belief they had carried for years suddenly began falling apart. The story they had told themselves. The assumptions. The fears. The doubts. Everything felt uncertain now. Why didn't you tell me? Your person whispered. The relative's eyes filled with regret. Because at the time, everyone thought moving on was the best thing for both of you. The answer hurt. But it was honest. Years ago, people believed they were protecting your person. Instead, they may have prevented two hearts from understanding the truth. Your person looked away. 1,000 emotions collided inside them. Pain, hope, regret, love, confusion. And beneath all of it, a tiny spark. A spark they thought had died long ago. The possibility that maybe the connection had never truly been one-sided. The possibility that maybe you had carried the same feelings. The possibility that destiny wasn't finished after all. The room remained silent as your person sat there absorbing everything. Then they smiled through tears. Not because all the pain was gone. Not because every question had been answered. But because for the first time in years, they no longer felt alone inside the story. And as the night came to an end, one truth became impossible to ignore. Out of every name in the world, out of every path life could have offered, out of every person they could have chosen, your name was still the one living inside their heart. And no matter how much time had passed, no matter how many obstacles had appeared, no matter how many people said it was impossible, the family finally understood what your person had known all along. Some names are not remembered. Some names are carried. And yours was one of them. The conversation ended. The room grew quiet. The lights slowly dimmed. But inside your person's heart, the story was not ending. It was only beginning again. Red Heart.